communication in the time of the crisis, to Sean Patrick Lovett. For those who don't know him, I'm pretty sure that everyone knows you, but for the introduction, the Sean Patrick Lovett is the expert and a doctor in communication. Professor Lovett holds a doctorate in communication from American University in Rome. In early 80s, he was a television news war correspondent, and primarily in the Middle East. He also worked as English department director of Vatican Radio over the past 40 years. And he served for 5 popes. Pope Benedict awarded him a papal knighthood in 2007. And for more than 60 years, Lovett has also served as a professor of media and management at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, and also including the Michigan State University, University of Minnesota, and University of Southern California. And he is a very good friend of all the students, especially of the students of journalism and communication here in Ukraine Catholic University as an institute also. And I have a great pleasure to give you this possibility to share with us some of your ideas about communication and about the period that everyone, really everyone, not only Ukrainian, lived in. So please.
For the invitation. And I must also thank Rome Reports, because if you see this beautiful studio around me with lights and sound, I have 2 of my colleagues, Arturo and Cesar, who are here in the studio, all to assist us. Our CEO, Antonio Olivier, who is connected with us, was delighted when I asked if I could use the studio today, because we want the very best for you. And for us and for our CEO, Antonio, and our colleagues, this is a very small gesture. It's a small gift that we can give to our friends in Ukraine to show you that we are with you and we support you. So you have asked me to make a brief presentation, and then I believe you will be asking some questions afterwards. And so my presentation begins, yes, with the flag you see behind me. In fact, it was last Saturday. It was last Saturday morning. I was in France for a series of meetings with CREC International. CREC International is the organization that sponsored my very first visit to Ukraine nearly 10 years ago. I was there in France, and I opened an email and saw the name Andrei of the Ukrainian Catholic University, where, yes, I've been teaching for many years. I confess that I think and I pray for my students, my colleagues, and all my friends in Ukraine every single day. So at first, I was delighted to hear from Andrei. That is until I read his request. He was asking me to address an online audience, that's you, on the theme of constructive communication, how to speak positively in times of crisis. My first reaction was, I can't do this. I won't do this. What can I possibly say about constructive communication at a time like this? I will have to say no. Please understand that I've addressed in my career many different audiences about many different things, but I have never spoken to people while their cities are being bombed, while their homes are being destroyed, while their children are dying, while they're burying their loved ones in graves in their backyards, even as I speak. So I wrote back to Andrei and I expressed these doubts and confusions. And I even dared to remind him, as if he didn't already know, that what is happening in Ukraine right now is so much more than a crisis. And then to speak about constructive communication in the midst of so much destruction seemed absurd to me. I said I was, and I still am, afraid of insulting any of you who are listening. And if Andrei had not responded to my message right away, we would probably not be here having this conversation at all. But he did. And this is what he wrote. Dear Sean, I'm totally aware we are in the middle of a war. The terrible aggression and all the death that is happening in our country cannot be communicated in a positive way. At the same time, we're trying to support each other and to think about the future, about what will happen when the war is over, when we will have to confront many new challenges, a broken economy, a broken education system, broken relationships on so many different levels. We will need journalists and communicators who will create constructive stories and messages so we can stay positive even in the worst of times. I know I'm asking for answers that no one can give, but your students need your support. Andrei. How can I ever refuse to support my students? After I read Andrei's message, I went to my computer and I watched a video we made in Lviv back in 2015. 2015, yes, the year after Maidan, the revolution of dignity, when the spirit of Ukrainian identity was stronger than ever. So strong that I remember inviting my students at UKU to tell me how they saw their country, and as future journalists, how they wanted to communicate Ukraine. This is what they told me.
My Ukraine is a peaceful country.
Ukraine isn't Russia. Ukrainians aren't Russian.
My Ukraine is still in Simferopol, Crimea.
My Ukraine is with Donbass and with Crimea.
My Ukraine is ancient European country, and don't forget about this.
My Ukraine is beautiful country with great development, I believe in it. Моя Україна – це країна, яка має багато проблем, вона розвивається.
My Crimea is Crimea.
My Ukraine is no Soviet country.
My Ukraine is marvelous country.
My Ukraine is a country of creative people who want to take care about their future.
When I watched this video again 7 years later, and knowing what we know now, it made me cry. It still does. So how could I possibly say no? Here I am, but before I begin, I ask you please to forgive me if what I am about to say sounds ridiculously simplistic. Please know that the only reason I am here is because I love you and I support you. So let's begin. Right, before I'm anything else, all those things that Andrei told you, I'm a biological father and an anthropological teacher. I love my children and I love my students, more than words can say. And like any teacher, when I do have to make a presentation, I often go back over notes that I made for previous presentations, not to copy them, but hopefully to get some inspiration. And that's exactly what I did. I found part of a presentation that I gave to journalism students at UKU several years ago about how to communicate an emergency, a problem, a crisis. I could never have imagined that one day I'd be applying the same paradigm to a war. As we teachers often do, I simplified the approach, maybe too much, so that it fit into a comfortable ABC. Now, not for a moment do I believe that the horrors being experienced in Ukraine right now fall into any of those categories, which I described as an emergency, a problem, or a crisis. War is not a crisis. War is a catastrophe. War is a disaster of indescribable dimensions, evil in its most visible and hideous manifestation. So kindly accept my ABC for what it is, a humble and imperfect attempt to offer some clues to providing communication that is constructive when everything around you speaks of being destructive. A is for acknowledging, recognizing the situation for what it is and calling it by its name. What's happening in Ukraine is not a conflict, it's a war. It's certainly not a special military operation. It's a deliberate attempt to destroy a democracy of 42 million people. Targeting a theater, sheltering innocent civilians is not a military attack. It's a war crime. Murder and mass persecution is not collateral damage. It's a crime against humanity. And that's not just my personal opinion. It's codified in international law. A is also for analyzing, trying to understand the causes in order to prepare for the effects, listening intelligently, and avoiding absurd simplifications like claiming it's all the fault of NATO. It's not trusting everything you read on social media. It's constantly being on the lookout for disinformation, propaganda, and the evil that lurks behind fake news. B stands for breathe deeply. Breathing deeply is a way to avoid overwhelming emotional responses, like when people ask you stupid questions, like, why doesn't Ukraine just give up and give in to Putin's demands? In other words, controlling your breathing can save you from hyperventilation and prevent a panic attack. It can also help you when you have to deal with people who say ignorant or stupid things about Ukraine, like what a poor and underdeveloped country it is. Obviously, they've never visited the Live Business School, where I personally have met a young man who made himself a millionaire at the age of 22. Ignorance is simply not knowing. So you can at least try to explain. Stupidity is not knowing you don't know. So don't waste your time. Stopping to breathe deeply allows you to pause, to think, to keep a clear mind, so that you can recognize the risks and act accordingly. C. C means concentrating on the cure. It's an invitation to focus on the solutions without being blinded by the problems, not to be discouraged by the failures of diplomacy or the duplicity of politicians, to look beyond the present moment, just as Andrei has asked me to do, however challenging this moment may be, and to recognize this moment will pass. It always does. Anyone who survived a war will tell you how in the midst of it, they believed the world had ended and that nothing would ever be the same. And yet, human resilience is such that somehow we do get through, and we do have to start thinking ahead. We do need to plan for the challenges we will have to face afterwards. There will be an afterwards. There will come a time to ask, what now? Yes, I know. At this moment, some of you may be thinking, who does he think he is? This journalist in his fancy studio in Rome, preaching to us about what war is and what it isn't? And you're correct. I, Sean Patrick, am not living through what you are living through right now. But I have seen war close up. I was in my 20s when I worked as a war correspondent. I reported on the barbarity of the civil war in Lebanon. I recorded the cruelty of several wars in Africa, and I've never forgotten, how could I? What I learned from those experiences is that all wars end. Sooner or later they do, and someone is left to pick up the pieces. So don't go away. Stay with me just a few more minutes, because this is the part where I answer Andrei's question and where we get to talk about why we're here, where we get to start imagining what some positive messages might contribute to that future moment when we get there and when we will be called to reconstruct that which others have chosen to destroy. I have to say that in preparing this presentation, Google wasn't any help at all. The best it could do in terms of offering me an image to illustrate constructive communication was this image of a wall, which I don't think is particularly useful to you. To me, constructive communication means weaving together different threads that contribute to giving us the hope and courage and strength that we need to face the challenges that we're living through now and that await us in the not too distant future. As communicators and journalists, we rely on words to act as symbols, to give us clues to what it is we're trying to say. So here are some positive words that I hope might be useful. They're not meant to replace the images of desperation and disaster that populate our news feeds at this time, but to complement and to counterbalance them in some way. Here they are. First word, awareness. Right now, Ukraine is the center of the world. Until last month, several of my foreign students didn't even know Ukraine was in Europe. Okay, so this map is for any of you who may be watching right now and are still not sure where Ukraine is. The Ukrainian flag right now is everywhere. People are showing it on their balconies from their homes. The Colosseum in Rome is lit up in the Ukrainian colors. On the city's underground metro network, there are huge posters depicting a blue sky over a field of wheat. Who knew that the significance behind the blue and yellow colors of the flag knew that the blue represents more than just the peaceful symbolism of the sky above us, but the curiosity, the vision, and the desire of the Ukrainian people to rise above, to go beyond, to search, to discover. Until now, did anyone outside Ukraine realize that the colors of the flag represent the character of the nation's people? Heads held proudly skyward, feet planted firmly on the earth, in the fields where they work to produce grain that until now has fed most of Europe and way beyond. Here's the second word. Yeah, it's kindness. How many people across the globe have been stirred to react to the war in Ukraine with acts of pure and disinterested kindness? My eldest son, Damien, came to me once to Lviv. He lives in London now, and he's been volunteering there. He tells me that collection centers in London have been so overwhelmed with donations, they're having to work 24-hour shifts in order to be able to distribute it. Compassion is close to kindness, but not quite. It's a word that comes from Latin, and it means literally to suffer with. Compassio. I feel what you feel. When you experience compassion, it's impossible to turn away and pretend like nothing is happening or that other people's suffering doesn't concern you. Generosity is the fruit of kindness and compassion. It's that inner instinct that reminds us we cannot just stand by and watch, that we must get involved, that we must give what we can materially, and why not, even spiritually. Solidarity is what we're seeing in the demonstrations that are taking place across the world. As more and more people come to realize we really are all connected. And as this poster, where is it? Oh, I'm sorry, there we go. This poster I photographed myself outside a theater in Rome this week proclaims, this theater in Rome is also the theater of Mariupol. I hesitated before adding this next word, prayer. And then I thought of all the masses and the prayer vigils and the religious celebrations that are being held, of all the candles that are being lit in all the churches and synagogues and temples and places of worship around the world at this moment. For those of us who believe and have faith, prayer is a powerful weapon. Pope Francis called for a special day of prayer and fasting for peace on March the 2nd, on Ash Wednesday here in Rome. And last Friday, he led a solemn and symbolic ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica, during which he consecrated both Ukraine and Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. During that ceremony, the Pope himself made it clear that these gestures are pious and powerful gestures. They're not some kind of hocus pocus. Listen to what the Pope himself said.
Di una formula magica, no, non è questo, ma si tratta di un atto spirituale. È il gesto del pieno affidamento dei figli che nella tribolazione di questa guerra crudele e questa guerra insensata che minaccia il mondo ricorrono alla madre. Come i bambini, quando sono spaventati, vanno dalla mamma a piangere.
If we do have faith, then we can believe in miracles. Miracles do happen. I know of at least one. It happened a few days ago to a former student of mine from UKU. There are some students who over time become more like your surrogate children, and Oleksiy is one of them. Here he is with me at the Vatican Radio, where he interned some years ago. I have his permission to tell you this story because it is his story. Oleksiy's mother was a nurse in Mariupol when the pediatric hospital there was bombed by the Russians. He and I spoke on the phone afterwards, and he sobbed as he told me he had no way of knowing whether his mother and his grandmother, who are his only relatives, were alive or dead. And then out of the blue, a few days ago, I received this message from him. My dear Sean, God has heard your prayers. A miracle has happened, and my family has escaped Mariupol. When no one would enter the area because of the heavy fighting in the streets, a group of church volunteers found my mother and granny sitting by a fire and agreed to get them out. They're safe now and on their way to Poland. I cannot call it anything else but a miracle. The trauma they've lived through will never go away, but I'm grateful to God for giving them the strength to survive. I will do everything in my power to guarantee a life for them, where there is no more war and no more pain. I have three last words for you that for me sum up our task and our vocation as positive journalists and as constructive communicators, using our skills and talents to provide messages that speak of hope. Hope that all will be well and that evil will be defeated and that good will triumph and that peace will be restored. Courage to face the trials of the present moment with resilience and perseverance, never to give up, and strength. The strength to start again when the war is over, to rebuild the homes and the hospitals and the schools, to reunite the families that have been dispersed, to comfort and console those who've lost everything. So I had just finished writing the last line, and I haven't even put down my mouse when my phone pinged. It was a message from another friend of mine at UKU, Sofia Opatska. Thank goodness she wasn't asking me to do another presentation. I don't think I would have the courage or the strength to do that. She was simply updating me on all the incredible and inspiring and positive things that the Ukrainian Catholic University has been doing over the past month and is doing. From running a volunteer center that provides humanitarian aid and assists refugees, to countering Russian propaganda, to providing spiritual and psychological support to those in need, all of this while continuing to run online distance learning programs for their students. If you're not from UKU and you haven't already done so, I strongly suggest you visit their website and see and find out for yourself, uku.edu.ua. What they're doing, what you are doing, is prophetic. You're an example to all of us. And I am so honored to be part of the extraordinary family of the Ukrainian Catholic University. God bless you. God bless Ukraine. Дякую. Over to you, Andrei. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your speech. I think, like, for me, the most powerful probably was, yeah, sure, a prayer, but also like to stay tuned, to be like in good mood, and we are talking especially about this thing now. And I divide the question that we received before in like two topics: the question of the war and also the professional questions to you as a journalist and communicator. So we will begin with the question of the war. What do you think will be the quality of communication in Ukraine after the victory, especially like we thought the type of the communication in Ukraine now, like it developed in less like 30 days. And what do you think this mainstream of the type of communication of good, an example of good communication could be developed, and maybe in what way?
Of the journalism school at UKU, as I said in my presentation, goes back 10 years. And so I'm not just thinking of how it is developing now, I'm thinking of how I have seen it develop over the past 10 years. And I've seen an incredible sense of responsibility and awareness on the part of the students. I'm very proud that some of our students are today working in prestigious communications and media outlets at Voice of America in the United States, and in so many other places, online media, television, radio, print, etc. So I have seen a development in terms of communication, and I know that our students will carry this forward. It's not a page turn. It's not that there's the period before the war, during the war, and after the war. Everything we are and everything we will be comes from where we have been in the past. So I don't think there will be a sudden kind of constructive, positive messaging. I think it's already there. And in the messages I receive from the university, like Sofia Opatska's message of yesterday, there's already the positive messaging. There are already the pictures of people doing all the things that I was talking about with those words, the expressions of kindness and compassion and solidarity and generosity. It's all there already.
Thank you. And one message from the chat, and Taras Zubansky is asking, in your opinion, what could be the role of religion, especially Christianity, in mitigating the war in Ukraine?
I purposely chose those two videos. I'm sure you felt with me that they expressed two important aspects for me. One is my students, our students, in whom I have so much hope and so much trust for their strength and their courage and their skills and their talents on the ground. And in the heavens, yes, we believe in the power of prayer. You saw, I showed you the pictures, thanks again to Rome Reports for that sequence of the Pope consecrating Ukraine and Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. But you've seen and you've heard how many times in every public opportunity, from the balcony, from the window in St. Peter's Square, in public, and I know also in private, because remember that we only know what the media tells us, but there's a lot the media doesn't tell us, that the Pope is calling for prayers, not only from Catholics, but from the entire Christian community. And I know he's joined in that sense from many of our brothers and sisters in the different Christian communities. Churches are living, physical, concrete, material reminders that God exists. Our churches are there as safe places, not just holy places, but safe places, as symbols and signs of that hope and that courage and that strength that I was speaking about earlier. And our churches and our belief systems, especially Christianity, teaches us that we must look ahead, we must look forward, we must believe that good will prevail, that evil cannot resist against the power of good, and that we need to have faith, and those miracles will happen. That is the message of the church, and that is the message that we continue to give in the face of the horror and the pain and the suffering.
Thank you. And like in last more than months, the topic of the war in Ukraine was on the first pages of every internet or any journal and everything. And like the question is how to properly continue the information campaign in Ukraine about the war, and if the interest will be lost, how to like return the focus of the West into the topic of the war.
You are a media expert, Father Andrei. You know as well as I do that media is fickle, yeah, and that we lose our attention and our concentration very quickly. So in a sense, in terms of media attention, this is a privileged time. I wasn't joking at the beginning of my presentation when I said that I have several foreign students who did not know until a month ago where Ukraine was on the map or whether it was part of Europe. Now, suddenly, Ukraine is the center of the world, and people are looking at Ukrainians, at your courage and your resilience, and people have that this country is standing up to the Russian bear and facing the attacks and the unity. So Italy likes talk shows. We have lots of talk shows on our TV programs. And every night someone will stand up on a talk show and say, what would happen if Russia attacked Italy? How would Italy react? And I know that it's not just Italy. Many countries around the world, the same questions are being asked. How would Britain react if Russia attacked Britain, and France and Spain and Germany? And the answer is we're not sure that we would respond quite the way you are responding, with the same courage and resilience. So you're a role model in a sense. And I hope that will remain. When the time comes for reconstruction, and the time will come, and there will be a lot of reconstructing to do, and not just mere material reconstruction, but psychological and emotional and personal, then yes, you will need the skills of our student journalists to be able to tell those stories. The sad stories, the tragic stories, and the happy stories. They go side by side. They're not mutually exclusive. For every tragic story, there is a story of a miracle. There is the story of a happy ending, like the story of Alexei.
Thank you, and I also want to add that I'm following all the Italian publication and is this like information influence, and I can assume that Italy is using a lot of empathy and emotions. And now is very like good time to enter, and I'm like all of the professor at the university is entering in different environment. I can say not only academical but political environment, economical, and so on to give also more senses, like not only the emotion that we have here, like the all numerous dead people, the towns that really ripped out from the end to the beginning, but also the sense what is going on here and what does it mean to be like Ukrainian in this period. So yeah, like probably the next step will be give more senses, not only the feelings. And about the question, where and like how
one more thing.
Remain. Yeah, sure.
Just one more thing. It's also a privileged opportunity, a privileged time to overturn the stereotypes. So we all live with stereotypes, right? I'm Irish, and so you think that I like green is my favorite color, and I drink a lot of Guinness, and it's not true, actually. Blue is my favorite color, and wine I prefer to beer. We think in terms of stereotypes. It was in church that I said in my presentation about people thinking Ukraine is a poor country. It was a priest during the sermon who was asking for contributions to Ukraine, who said, because you know, the Ukrainians are these poor women who come to Italy to help old people. We call them badanti. And they come, you know, because Ukraine is such a poor country. They have nothing to eat. They are so poor. And I had to go to him after the Mass and say, Father, have you been, do you really know anything about Ukraine? I talked to him about the Lviv Business School and how your entrepreneurs, how brilliant and creative they are, and what an extraordinary country yours is. So this is an opportunity also to inform people and to instruct people and to overturn a lot of the ignorance that there is about Ukraine. Sorry, that was it. Your next question.
Yeah, this question is more about probably the psychology and where to take a long-term force to be positive in the time of the crisis.
Okay, so I will not lie to you. I'm an Irish Catholic. I'm not allowed to lie. So I was at the Pontifical Gregorian University this morning, where I still teach a communications course. And I met one of she's a student at the Gregorian University, but she is also from Lviv. And I told her that I was doing this, I would have this conversation with you this afternoon. And I told her what the topic was. And she rolled her eyes to the ceiling and she said, say no. You can't do that. It is hypocrisy to speak about constructive communication or positive messaging in the middle of a war when people are dying and people are crying. And I said, I've already said yes. And she said, well, good luck, because whatever you're going to say, people are going to hate you. I hope you don't hate me. I really am doing the best I can. But I agree with, it took me everything that I said to be able to say yes. I don't think we can put our heads above the clouds and say, just look forward to a brighter future. We need to address the issue in the now. We need to acknowledge, that was my first word. We need to acknowledge what is happening, the pain and the suffering and the destruction, and together at the same time, think about what we will be saying when things get better. So I admire your courage in having this conversation this afternoon, but I don't want to go too far with this idea of being positive, because too many bad things are happening right now. Yes, I am avoiding the question. Yes, I am avoiding the question. I admit. Yes.
And also the question from Donelo Vavrio. How long do you think the attention to Ukraine how will remain, and what can interrupt this attention?
How long will it remain in terms of time?
Yes.
I have no,
Yes.
we have no idea. I have no crystal ball. We are hoping that the war ends and that it ends soon, and that peace will return, and we can think about reconstruction in all the ways we have spoken about. A yardstick, a way to gauge that time frame you're asking me about, is simply to look at what has happened in previous circumstances and previous wars. I think of the wars that I have covered as a war correspondent. There was a terrible civil war that took place in Lebanon that lasted for years and left horror and destruction and pain and suffering in its wake. It was in the early 1980s. It was 40 years ago. If I were to ask some of my foreign students today, where is Lebanon? I wonder how many could put their fingers on the map. So it's difficult to put a time stamp on how long the attention will stay. It will definitely stay for some time after the war, because we will need to concentrate on reconstruction, and we will be able to count on that kindness and generosity and compassion that we are counting on already. And then another war will break out somewhere else, and bad things will happen somewhere else, and our attention will go there, because that is the way our media works. It's sad but true.
Thank you. And the question from the professional side, how could be written the story positively, especially if the most stories in Ukraine are very scary, and the rape girls or women, the deaths, and really, where is the border for the journalist to deliver this kind of the story? What are the regulars that he could be like having during creating this type of the stories?
It's a question that I get asked during every single journalism class from every single journalism student when we talk about war or being a war correspondent. The temptation is always to move towards sensationalism, isn't it? Because sensation draws, it's clickbait on social media, it draws attention. A woman crying on screen will draw attention, but only for a while, because there's always the danger, is there not, that we will become immune to the bad things that we see and we hear. And that is the danger, that too much pain and too much blood and too many tears, in the end, we do just turn away because it's something that we have seen already. And so every journalist, it's a little like cooking, isn't it? It's knowing how much salt and how much pepper and how much peperoncino to put in the meal. Enough to keep it tasty, but not so much that it burns your mouth and you have no taste left at all. It's about balance. It's constantly about balance.
And also how to build a positive thread in the story. What is your experience of building this kind of stories that could be like connected together?
We are journalists, we work in media, we're communicators, and so we understand what the rules of communication are and what it is that attracts people. I can prepare a beautiful story for television, for radio, for print, for online consumption, but if it does not attract attention, my efforts are worthless. So to know that, for example, we are attracted by heroes. The world needs heroes. Your president right now, Zelensky, is a hero. And he knows how to use media. He is a brilliant and a true expert in using media. Not too much, not too little. He balances where he is, how he dresses, what the backgrounds are. Personally, I'm very struck when he addresses members of parliament in different countries and he gets a standing ovation. He doesn't stand there on screen and bow and acknowledge and wave to the crowd. He gets up and he leaves the room because the applause is not for him. It's a brilliant use of how to balance, how to understand the medium and what is attractive to the medium, and to use those rules of media to get your positive message across. So if you're looking for an example, you don't need to look any further than your president right now.
Thank you. And I want to say that we have like 10-15 minutes more with Sean Patrick Lovett. If someone have a question, please send it to our chat. And I have two more. And the question, how to write and speak effectively in the crisis situation. Not only, this question is not only about the war, but like in every crisis. What could be on the base of this type of communication?
We talk about that fake news is the big, the big words, and we talk about telling the truth and what is truth and how do we tell the truth and how do we fight propaganda and so on and so forth. We study that, we know that, we work on that. There are algorithms that can help us and so on and so forth. But to answer directly your question, I think there are two criteria. The one is to ask, when you are writing, when you are putting together a story in a crisis, you finish writing the story and you ask, is this useful? Is this helpful? Does it tell people something that they need to know? Not that they want to know, because they can find out what they want to know from all sorts of sources. Is this something that they need to know? Is this something that is going to build them up, that is going to extend their awareness, that is going to help them to understand the situation better? Is this useful? Does it bring people together to a greater understanding? And is it good? Does it advance goodness? We have a choice. Huh? We can communicate goodness or evil, badness. Huh? Does it only focus on the bad things, the terrible things, the evil that is happening? Or does it show people the heroism and the kindness and the compassion and the solidarity and the generosity that is inside people, and maybe inspire, that's another word too. To be inspirational, to bring people out of themselves. Pope Francis speaks about this all the time. He speaks about the need not to concentrate on what is inside, to be turned in on ourselves, but whatever messages, whatever communication can bring us out of ourselves and make us aware that we are connected and that your pain is my pain, your suffering is my suffering. That is compassion.
Probably your answer goes not only for the effective communication in the period of the crisis, but for the meaning of everything, like to be useful for someone and give the inspiration. And at least it's a good 2 words for the meaning of the life, I think so. And as the last question, what do you think is the most important thing in communication, and what kind of questions or arguments are the better to use during the period of the crisis?
Hey, Andrei, I have to say that before coming to do this conversation with you this afternoon, I had butterflies in my tummy. And I still have butterflies in my tummy because I feel a little bit like I'm a student back at university and I'm being examined for something I haven't studied very well. I haven't read the book that I was supposed to study for this exam. You ask me very difficult questions. I'm very happy I'm not your student. Huh? Your questions are really tough. So yes, just say that what was the basis of the question again? Oh yes, what I consider to be the most important points for communication. What do I consider?
Yeah.
Sean Patrick, what do you consider the most important points? Right. Honesty. That honesty brings in its truthfulness and sincerity and authenticity. I think authenticity is a strong word. Authenticity is yes, it's another form of honesty and sincerity, isn't it? It's not playing games. It's not pretending to be something that you're not, or to say something that you don't really believe. That's authenticity. Because that gives us credibility. That's why we believe each other, don't we? And in the end, if I am writing or producing messages and communicating messages, what I need is for you to believe me. And if you feel for a moment by what I'm saying or how I'm saying it, that I'm insincere, that I don't really believe what I'm saying, that I'm putting on a performance, an act, and it's not authentic, it's not real, then you will already switch off and go somewhere else. So yes, the content is important. The content, we try to make it useful. We try to bring significance and meaning to our content, but at the same time, the way in which we present it in terms of communication, yes, I think honesty, sincerity, authenticity is the key. Be and say what and who you are.
Thank you. Yeah, we in the school built some kind of formula as you use ABC. We use that everything have to be built on the base of the values. Only with the values you could create a message, and then this two consistent thing could go to the content. So it's the effective communication for us, at least, it's something that is go from the values to the message and to the different types of the content. So thank you. And really, we are very grateful for you for an amazing lecture and for your time. And we have a lot of messages to you in this period. First of all, the thank you for your support, and and we have also one question from the Stas Korolkov. So please, Stas, before the concluding.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to give a very short note that my colleague Anna Deviatka has also gave a question in the chat. That's well, I should say much more interesting than my question, but still. So, dear Sean, thank you so much for your lecture. I have the question concerning the disputes that are now taking place in Ukraine, at least in social media, about the amount of presence of Russian culture in Ukraine after the war. Well, undoubtedly that all the attention of Ukrainians is now fully concentrated on the war, but still there are some thoughts that after our victory, we should take out all the elements of Russian culture from Ukrainian education. Well, for instance, I've heard that poems and novels of Russian poets and writers dating back to 18th or 19th century, they also should be taken out from the school program of education. Some people think that this is too much, that those guys who died like 200 years ago had nothing to do with this war. But still, I want to ask you, could you please help us to draw this threshold, crossing this threshold that people would say that, no, guys, that is too much. So thank you.
I've even heard people go further than that. I have been hearing people saying that the Russian language should be banned in Ukraine, and that people who speak Russian in Ukraine, and there are many Russian-speaking Ukrainians, should be forced to speak only Ukrainian. So yes, there is that response. But that's an emotional response, isn't it? And we recognize that as we would say a gut. It's a gut response, a knee-jerk response, an emotional reaction to what is happening. There's an enemy in my house. I want the enemy out of my house. And when the enemy leaves my house, I want the enemy to take everything with him. All the furniture and everything must go. They must clean out my house. But that is an emotional reaction. And that was my B suggestion, which is that we have to stop and breathe. And sometimes the breathing just means to let some time go by. So the discussion will take place, and it is taking place, and it will continue to take place. Let some time go by and let the breath let it go. Of course, it's not the solution. You know it's not. I know it's not. It's a silly solution. Cancel culture, any kind of cancel culture anywhere is not useful. You don't tear the statue down. You put up a plaque underneath the statue that explains why the statue was put up and why the statue is inappropriate today, that there is a lesson to be learned from history. We do not cancel history and the people that have come with it. We explain what happened, and we try to teach as educators the lessons that we learn from history.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
I want to ask for the permission. We have two more questions, and probably, and those could be the last one. Do we have like more time?
Okay. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, this one, it will be like the question with the cross. From Anna Devyatko. Following some weeks ago, a well-known Russian propagandist of Syanikova went on the screen of one Russian TV channel with a banner calling to stop Russian aggression. First of all, they say there is no on-air news on Russian TV to minimize the risk, and all other reasons. Seconds of all during 8 years of Syanikova has been spreading hard propaganda, and she decided to wake up only now. Besides, on your professional experience, on the base of your professional experience, what do you think was a real intention of this action, and how do you evaluate it, especially taking into account her current narratives she is spreading in the Western media, asking to cancel sanctions? So yeah, it's the question with the cross, you know. You will give the highest mark.
Of course, I followed the story, and I saw the reaction on both sides. So here she is, she's defending Ukraine, she's daring to do this. She's a hero. On the other side, she's discredited, she is working, she's part of the Russian propaganda machine. So in the Catholic tradition, we do not judge people. We give them what we call the benefit of the doubt. I do not know what is happening inside her head. I do not know her personally. I do not know her motives. What I do know is that the gesture did provoke a lot of reaction and got a lot of people talking about Russian propaganda. So here again, there is a potentially negative story that has a potentially positive twist to it. For several days, I saw and I read a lot of journalists talking about how the Russians use propaganda and how they twist things around. So in the end, whether it was a good story or a bad story, whether she's sincere or not sincere, what I care about is that a new message came through. Look out, do not believe everything you see, do not take things simply at face value. And that was a lesson that we learned. So thank you to her, whatever her reasons.
And today, the largest TV channels in Ukraine have joined forces to broadcast the situation live, like online. And on...
Andrei,
what was my score on that? What grade did I get?
Yeah, depends on the test gradation type.
And you're going to all right, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I have to give you the highest mark, you know, you are answering the question more than 40 minutes, so it could be it had to be like evaluated. So the last one for today, like all the largest TV channels are transmitting and broadcasting the situation live, especially here in Ukraine. Every channel, like private or government channels, are speaking about the war. And like after, at least Yulia Reznachok is feeling this, after this more than 30 days of the war, for someone, it transformed into something kind of entertainment. So how could we avoid that?
Is that risk, isn't there? And we spoke about that earlier, overexposure. And that certainly younger people who play with PlayStation and so forth can confuse what they're seeing in reality on their TV with what they're playing on their PlayStation. That is a danger. How to combat that is, it's always about balance, isn't it? I believe that is why God gave us two hands and not just one, to remind us that balance is so important. And so on the one hand, as journalists and communicators, we have a duty and a responsibility to communicate the reality of what is happening. On the other hand, we have the duty and the responsibility to explain why it is happening and that there are other stories that are worth telling as well. Balance, harmony, authenticity.
Thank you. And I have to return to my thanks notes. And I have to say that normally I'm not giving for the students the 100, the maximum of the marks. But I have to say that probably you did a very good job today. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your help, for your support, for amazing and very inspired lesson. We are very grateful for your answers, and God bless you. And also, maybe if you want to add something for all of the students of the School of Journalism and Communication, and also for the Institute of Leadership, this is the right time.
Andrei, thank you. I think I've said everything I had to say in the first part of my presentation. I said how much I support you, how much I love you, how much I think about you and pray for you every day, and what an honor it has been to be able to engage with you today. There's not much more to say. I do want to thank Rome Reports for their generosity, and my director, Antonio Olivier, and my colleagues, Cesar Espos and Arturo, who are here with me in the studio and have made this professionally possible. I didn't want to do this from home, sitting in my armchair in my home. I wanted to be able to do it with PowerPoints and with videos to show you that you are important and that we do care about you and that we want to give you the best that we have. And that is what we've tried to do this afternoon. So again, thank you. God bless you. God bless Ukraine. Дякую.
Thank you.